let's face it, especially in the UK, many of our streets simply aren't very good. It's difficult to see how we might repurpose them for social distancing. In this example, the pavements are not wide enough to allow people to pass each other. And as you can see, it's cluttered with billboards and bollards and litter bins. And the few drivers pictured here have plenty of space, but they can't actually stop to use the local businesses. So the question I've got then is, under lockdown, we've seen reduced traffic flow and people have been walking on less busy streets to maintain social distance from others, which leads to a wider question. In making our centres safer now, can we also think about the public realm in the long term? Could the new normal actually be a better normal? So I'm bringing in some examples from something we call tactical urbanism. That those of you who've done the MSc will know a little bit about this already. But the growing evidence from across the world of places deploying what we call tactical urbanism measures to transform public space. So what is it? Well, typically community-led, short-term, low-cost and scalable place-based interventions. Best summarised in Leiden and Garcia's book, Tactical Urbanism, an umbrella term to capture numerous examples which you might be more familiar with, like pop-up urbanism, for example. Tactical urbanism perhaps reflects a frustration within many communities who find authorities slow to respond, or they simply don't listen to them. And perhaps more typically, people who want to do something positive for their places, but that are then defeated by a multitude of rules, regulations, and bylaws. So it's no surprise many communities do become disenchanted and sometimes hostile with authorities because planned improvements take years to happen. Tactical urbanism shows how people have bypassed formal planning processes and enacted place improvements themselves, what Nabil Hamdi calls making plans without the usual preponderance of planning. So what does tactical urbanism offer? Well, immediate reclamation, redesign and reprogramming of public space. For communities, a way of quickly making places safer and more livable. For professionals, a way of collecting data and intelligence. And for government, to put best practice into practice, but quickly. And the question is, as Kathy alluded to in the introduction, can we leave management of public space outside to stores and to individual businesses? In large centres, we've got a concentration of many shops and services, potentially reopening in a phased level. But how can those store managers be expected to manage queues on the street? It's a possibly chaotic situation. And the other consideration is that where we have seen measures put in place, they're pretty low quality. They hardly enhance place experience, are not conducive to feeling comfortable in a place. So we need to do something quickly. We need to restore confidence in our centres, but also let's do something good. And if it works, keep on doing it. So this is what we might take from tactical urbanism. A key start point here is and this has become really apparent under lockdown, is just how much space there is within cities, but we give it over to a single mode of transport. And how little space is dedicated for pedestrians and cyclists. Now here's a consideration, 11.5 square metres is the size of an average UK parking space. Times that by the number of parking spaces in your centre, and then consider what percentage of this space is currently unused. You've got a lot of space to play with, either on the street or in car parks. So here outside Islington Mill in Salford, I pictured this last week, you can attach 10 bicycles in a space dedicated for one car. And what if we began to scale this up? What could we achieve? Here in Paris, cars were banned for a day. Could this be a permanent feature? In Bogota, it is. Where every Sunday the city shuts its major roads. It brings 1 in 7 people out on their bikes. That's 1 million people. And doing this doesn't necessarily require massive investment. It can be an inexpensive and quick way of reclaiming streets from traffic. Here, the community unofficially created a bike lane. Elsewhere, they created a traffic calming solution. And here, to bring attention to an unsafe road crossing point. And in this example, a simple solution to create space for walking and cycling. In this case, you don't need architects or a mega budget. The community here have used found items, even stuff from the garden shed. Now, if ordinary people can do this with no formal training, why can't professionals? And where interventions have worked, local authorities have begun to sanction activities, leading eventually to more formal place improvements, like this scheme in San Francisco. Notice it retains the impact barriers, they're just nicer ones, and you've got a wider sidewalk. And I'd like to bring attention to W.H. White's book, The Social Life of Small Urban Spaces. According to this book, there is a multitude of unused, leftover and forgotten microspaces, vacant lots, overtly wide streets, underpasses, which could be quickly repurposed to expand the amount of public space within our centres. Now, I'm not suggesting a free-for-all. There's a role for government in terms of regulating and development control, but what can state authorities do to facilitate more flexibility of what can be done in public space? Now, around the world, we're beginning to see some examples. Around 60 cities in the USA have introduced tactical measures, and we're beginning to see some examples in Europe. I'll bring you some examples here. Oakland have shut down 74 miles of city streets to cars. Duluth, really interesting, they closed 3 park roads, but in certain areas, where the residents had limited access to public space. Charleston has introduced automated pedestrian walk signals and is telling residents that there's no need to push the button. That could be a permanent thing. And Milan are now remodeling the city centre, transferring 22 miles of road space for pedestrian and bike use and limiting traffic speed in the centre. And I draw your attention to the Social Life Project, which provides more guidance on how we might manage public realm after lockdown. More creative use of sidewalks and streets. For example, reduce the constrictions on sidewalk cafes. If you can put more seating outside, it frees up space inside to manage social distancing. Reduce the regulation and make it easier, facilitate that. And market spaces in particular. Here we have spaces which are very flexible in terms of their spatial configuration. We can quickly change activity hours, so we don't have everyone coming into the centre at the same time, using market spaces. So there's some good practice there. And eventually, what Social Life Project are recommending is lighter, quicker, cheaper placemaking. And let's embed some of this into our neighbourhood plans, local planning. So just a few things in conclusion. I think we got a bit of a tension in terms of rapid response between formal, regulated, and top-down authorities and the kind of community initiatives I've outlined here. For me, place managers sit at the intersection here. They can help facilitate innovative, rapid solutions, but one which are also safe and regulated. And I think the other thing to think about here is this is not just, there's things we need to do quickly in the short term to develop place assurance, create environments which give people confidence to visit centres. But let's take some of these measures forward. What might be learned from this to create more livable places in the future? Could some of these temporary schemes become more permanent? And in the long term, if we focus on reducing car dependency and promote cycling and walking, this will help cities address the climate change agenda going forward. So where next? There's loads of guidance out there. There's obviously Tactical Urbanism itself, the book, very accessible. Open Streets Guide in the UK, Manual for Streets, the Smart Growth Manual. It's also worth looking at Project for Public Spaces in New York. And Social Life Projects have put some guidance out on how markets might be repurposed and flourish with social distancing. And there's one more thing I want to say. I mean, let's not forget the importance of public space and how it connects people to place. It's where communities are built. It's how people develop a sense of belonging and identity. And it's useful to channel Jane Jacobs there for a reminder of why public space is important, and avoid perhaps top-down knee-jerk imposition of control on public space, which might reinforce existing concerns by the likes of Anna Minton that we've already lost too much of it already.